Gerardo, welcome. We are here in the world of Agile methodologies, which is worldwide. And this is one of our sessions where we get to explore how Agile is being used, how widespread it is in other parts of the world. So we are very, very excited to have Gerardo. Gerardo is a real world Agilist in Latin America, focusing not only in Guatemala. He's a seasoned registered Scrum trainer. He is the founder and CEO of aprendescrum.com, and with a mission to foster Agile and Scrum practices in Guatemala and across Latin America. Gerardo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ernesto. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Excellent. And Gerardo, right off the cuff, when we spoke, we communicate in Spanish, right? Is how Gerardo and I naturally communicate. We are collaborators in many ways. And when we decided to have this segment, we decided that it would be best to have it in English in order to reach the community of perhaps English-speaking only individuals that have a high interest in what's going on around the world with agility, including Latin America. So Gerardo agreed to that, and we switched languages to English just so that we can reach many of you. So thank you for doing that, Gerardo. All right.
My pleasure.
Gerardo, could you share some perspective on the current state of Agile adoption in Guatemala and maybe even across Latin America? What are you seeing there, and how is that evolving?
Yeah. Well, in fact, I used to live in Paris. I lived there for 10 years. This was in 2011, and I came back here to Guatemala. And I was surprised to see that when I searched among the people who had a certification, I was the only guy in Guatemala in the whole country to have a Scrum Master certification. So yeah, this was quite a time ago, maybe 9 or 10 years ago. So we started to create the Agile community here in Guatemala. Some people were interested. I remember I was the first guy to bring a certified Scrum trainer to Guatemala. We gave the first courses of Scrum Master, and of course I went to different companies. I founded the first company to implement Agile or to implement Scrum and train companies. And this is something funny because I went to a lot of companies to explain them what Agile is, what Scrum is, how does it work, and they were like, "No, you're crazy, man. No way. We are doing this. Thank you for coming, but this will not work." And 9 years later, they came back searching for me. Because I think that the maturity of the mindset of the leaders of the companies have been changing in the last 10 years. I think that in the Agile mindset, of course, we are a little bit behind the United States. I would say we are maybe 5 or 6 years behind. But in fact, I used to work for a public trading company as the vice president of process and delivery, and the problems I used to have in this American company are the exact same problems we are dealing with our clients right now. Something interesting is that the biggest companies are leading this Agile transformation wave, which it's amazing. I mean, for example, we are right now working with a bank here in Guatemala, which is the biggest bank in Guatemala, and then they are in fact leading all these Agile transformation. So this is not starting with the smallest companies, but it's starting with the biggest companies, which is something amazing for me. I mean, I wasn't expecting this. We are working as well for a sugar production industry, which happens to be the biggest one in Guatemala. By the way, it's the second biggest in the world. So yeah, the big players are leading this agile transformation. And another thing that it's interesting is that well, there are a lot of companies implementing agile right now, starting to plan and to execute the agile transformation. But I think that a sector which is really into this agile transformation wave is banking, for sure. I think that the biggest banks in the region are right now, if not doing an agile transformation, they are planning on doing an agile transformation. Of course, the level of maturity are different among the banks. And I think that some of them have no clue of what an agile transformation is. But as everybody is speaking about this, the other banks are speaking about this. They want to do it even if they don't quite understand what's happening, right? However, there are other banks that are taking this seriously. And for example, with this big bank, we started like with the Scrum, the basic Scrum. And 1 year later, we will, which happens to be in a couple of months, we'll start to implement Scrum at scale and really to scale up the agility of the organization. So yeah, it has been quite a trip and an adventure for the last 10 years in Guatemala. And yeah, the change is huge from being the only single person to be certified in Scrum. And now everybody, a lot of companies are switching into this. So yeah, this is my point of view from the industry.
That's fantastic. I might have seemed distracted, but I was taking notes because you hit on a lot of points that I think are fascinating and very relevant to the history we've had in the United States and maybe where we are going in the United States. First of all, congratulations on being the first person to bring the certification industry and preparation to Guatemala. And what caught my attention right out the gate, you said it took 9 years for people to finally hear the message. That's a long time, right? That's a lot of door knocking. And I think our audience would love to hear, what was it that, what were they not ready for yet? What was the shift? What was the change that you saw in the culture or in the open-mindedness that made that difference 9 years after you started?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, and it was not a switch, right? From we don't want agile to we need agile. It was like progressive. So for example, each client is different, but the client I am working with, they started with, no, we need fixed scope, fixed date. So everything you are telling me is no nonsense, right? But they saw that this wasn't working, and this will never work. And when they told me, no, because in this company we have fixed dates and fixed scope. Okay, perfect. So just tell me something. Have you made some changes or have you asked extra things during this project? Oh yeah, of course. So it's not fixed scope. You are in a fantasy, right? So I think that they understood they needed to start using like Agile and Scrum. But as Dr. Jeff Sutherland says, the contrary of Scrum is not waterfall. The enemy of Scrum is not waterfall. The enemy of Scrum is bad Scrum, right? So they decided to go to Scrum to give a try to Scrum, but they will not. I mean, it's hard if you have a huge company to call the little Guatemalan that is there speaking about Scrum, and not asking for huge international companies to help you to do this transformation, right? So yeah, they started using bad Scrum. So after a couple of years, Scrum became a bad word. You couldn't even say Scrum because it was a disaster. So yeah, I think this was the reason why it took so long for them to adopt Scrum. The worst thing you can do is to adopt bad Scrum, because then all the management and all the governance of the company will try to impede to implement that harmful thing again, right? And they have some concepts, as for example, with Scrum you will have no control, which is the opposite, right? Because with Scrum you will have more control, more transparency, and you will start seeing results, good or bad results, faster, right? So I think this time when they tried Scrum and didn't work was among the things that took more of the time for this agile transformation. And for the rest of the companies, I don't know if in the United States is like this, but here in Guatemala, when the lead company, when the biggest shoe seller will do something and it will work, the rest of the shoe sellers will follow the lead. So I think this is something that played as well. And it's the reason why many big companies are right now, or many companies are right now, like following the lead of the big one, which is already having good results. And of course, the agile transformation is incredible because you need to deal with a lot of things at the same time. It's not just doing things better, doing things faster, leveraging the level of life of the people, but at the same time you need to pay attention to all the politics inside the company, right? Because you need to convince high management that this is working. And something I have noticed that almost no agile coach or no agile consultant I have ever known here in the region is able to tell you what is the return on investment of what I'm doing. Okay, so what are the results? So before you weren't estimating right, and now it's perfect. You are estimating perfectly. And before the product owner didn't work as well, and now the user stories are perfectly, and the product backlog. For upper management, the answer is I don't care. What are my results? How many money are you saving to me every single month? So you need to deal, I would say, with these at least two aspects, right? Making it work, which is already difficult, and showing to management, upper management, that this is working, but they don't speak the same language as the operative part of the company. They speak results, they speak return on investment, they speak other languages. So you need to be careful of both of them at the same time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I often talk about that in terms of the function of a agile coach or an agile consultant or a transformational service offered to a company. That translation layer that needs to exist between the teams doing agile and the rest of the organization, right? For many years and decades, agile has been a team focus initiative, where now in scaling, the consideration is well, how are you interacting and what are you bringing to the table when it comes to the organization, right? Not just about productivity, but about value delivery. And I think it's our job as Agile coaches to ensure that that translation layer exists so that both sides can continue to collaborate and eventually become just one side, right? Over a period of time, that journey evolves. So we're not far off either in America. I think the next step that we're taking as an Agile community is that Agile leadership, right? Bringing agility to the C-suite and making sure that there is a connection, there is alignment between the strategy and the execution. And how we do that is by scaling that implementation. A lot of what I've heard you say. So there's a lot of common element there. A couple of things you mentioned too. You mentioned Jeff Sutherland, Dr. Jeff Sutherland. For those that aren't familiar, Jeff Sutherland is the co-creator of Scrum and the creator of Scrum at Scale, right? Both frameworks which you cited. And I remember having a conversation with Dr. Sutherland once, and he said, Ernesto, you will always be handsomely employed because there's so much bad Agile out there. There's so much bad Scrum. You can just go around fixing Scrum for the rest of your life. And that's not to be condescending or to beat people that are struggling with challenges, but the idea that there's so many opportunities for businesses, for people, for organizations to improve how they're implementing Scrum that we're busy around the clock, right? And that's good news. And I think I heard you say something similar in Latin America as far as, hey, can we address those organizations that are also doing Scrum that could use a tune-up, that can use some improvements, that might be doing Agile, but, right? We do Agile, but we don't have a retrospective. We do Agile, we do Scrum, but we don't have a Scrum Master, right? So I'm finding a lot of similarities. And by the way, on financial, I worked in investment banking for quite a bit in the technology sector. Same type of sentiment here, right? If the big bank is doing it, we want to do that, right? Well, you don't need a OC3 line coming into your building, given the bandwidth that you have at the time when I was implementing this. I said, no, but we need it because so-and-so bank has it, right? So in how institutions tend to think, that doesn't seem to be that different either. Thank you for sharing all of that, Gerardo. Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the culture factor and how that has influenced the adoption of the practices, right? In Agile, there is an implied assumption, or there is a agreement that we trust each other, that you are showing up to do your best. And what we are doing is getting out of the way or helping you to improve how you're working and how you're delivering value. I'm speaking from the point of view of a leader. When you're dealing with a culture that is used to a hierarchical or a structure that is more authoritative, do what I say or else, that tends to have a lot of impact. That tends to have a lot of permeations and negative outcomes. How are you navigating the Latin America way of thinking about business and agility?
How painfully. I think that well, it's a mix of different things. I think that it plays the Latin American culture, which is I mean it's bad sometimes to make mistakes, right? So sometimes if I made a mistake, instead of showing to everybody that I did this, I will try to cover it, right? Because I don't want no one to know that I did this. And another thing that plays is not just a generic Latin American culture, but the culture of huge enterprises. And traditional enterprises are as banking. Something interesting in banking, because many years ago when I started like to chase clients or to see which who would like to have an agile transformation, I thought that maybe little startups, research companies, or software development companies were like much easier to start with. And for me, it was really surprising to see that huge traditional companies as banking are the ones that are currently asking more for agile transformations. I think that maybe it's because of the risk of the fintechs that are starting to grow and grow and grow, and they have noticed that if they don't start to be faster, they will disappear eventually. So I think this is a response to a threat, which is all the technology in financing. But I think that yeah, what we are dealing with huge companies in silos, and each silo or each department don't speak with the other silos, right? And they try to cover their mistakes. And I'm speaking about all the huge companies. The normal culture is to hide all the problems that you created in your silo, so the other silos will not notice this, right? So I think that one of the most biggest challenges are creating transparency by breaking up these silos, and start having like really different teams. I forgot how to say equipos multifuncionales, cross-functional teams. Yeah, so it's really hard to have cross-functional teams, not because of the fact of doing it, but because of the fear that all my mistakes, everybody will see my mistakes. But so far, this even if this was a challenge, is something that is happening right now. And something that is creating a lot of transparency is the scaling, right? With the scale daily Scrum, where all the problems are just going up. But I think that leaders, for example, if a leader will see that there was a problem 4 weeks ago and he didn't know about this, he will get really angry and everybody is fearful about him. But when he will start seeing like little problems on daily basis and he will understand that this is happening, he will not get as mad. I think that most of the leaders don't get mad because of the mistake, but they get mad because there was a mistake, no one told him, and no one did nothing. So they will wait for it. So I think that the culture of creating transparency in order to inspect and adapt is among the most challenging things we are facing right now. And the other part is, of course, we with big companies, after creating the transparency, it's easy to inspect. However, you need to have support from upper management to do things as, for example, lean, in order to not have that a big amount of waste, the value stream mapping, for example, because what it's difficult after creating this transparency is to be able to adapt fast. A change in a huge corporation could take months, even if it's a little change. So something we saw as well is we had a backlog with all the challenges we have, and the backlog was growing really fast, and the execution speed was not as fast as the problem detection. So I think this is like the second challenge you will have after creating the transparency. So yeah, I think that will be the most two difficult challenges, not in banking, but in huge silo organized corporations.
That's very interesting, because I've noticed a similar, and the studies show that some cultures, in particular Asia, struggles with power distance. The distance there is between the person who you report to and yourself, right? And what we try to do is to create, in Agile, create a culture where there is a lesser power distance so that I'm comfortable communicating the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I like to say, right? And what you describe is this watermelon reporting, right? The idea that the watermelon is green on the outside, but very red on the inside. I'm only going to show you the outside. Let's not talk about the inside. We're not going to show anybody else that because we don't want them to see that we failed. So when working with international teams, sometimes one of the things that we coach is that, look, this is a safe place to fail. In fact, we want you to fail fast. We encourage fast failure so that we learn and continue, creating an environment where they're free to experiment. And it seems like that's one of the first challenges that you had to overcome. And then you also mentioned this idea of a very large backlog that where people are just continuing to add stuff, right? The backlog is the list of work that we create, we prioritize them, and we get them ready for development. And everybody's just throwing stuff in there, and it's not moving as fast as the demand. I tend to see that quite a lot as well, right? That has to do with the fact that, hey, the teams are now paying attention. They're delivering. Before we had zero delivery. Now we have some delivery. So now the stakeholders get ambitious about what they really need. They get more vocal. So the growth of that initial transformation in the backlog is impactful. And that I see as a good sign. I don't know about you, but I see that as a good sign that, hey, we're getting now people that are being very vocal about how we can improve the product. And now we need to get the teams to deliver at a faster rate, as Sutherland said, right? Twice the speed or twice the work in half the time, which gives us that 4x factor. So far, you got to help me, Gerardo. I'm not seeing a lot of difference between Latin America and the United States. We're on the same boat.
Yeah, as I told you, I'm seeing it with all the clients we have, the same problems. We are dealing with the same problems as I used to deal with this public training company in the United States. So yeah, and something interesting is that we are seeing and dealing more or less with the same problems, regardless if this is a bank or this is a sugar production factory or this is a software development company. In general terms, they have the same problems every time. Of course, we have different challenges on specific companies. For example, when you are speaking about agriculture, sometimes you will run an experiment, but in order to understand the result of this experiment, you need to wait 1 year for the plant to grow up, right? So in some cases, you need to deal with not that fast feedback from your experiments. But in general terms, the problems you will see in any kind of industry, it's kind of the same. However, there are some specific problems that you will only see in huge corporations that are, the silos and a little bit more resistance to change.
So I think you partly answered where I wanted to go. Was hoping we would go next, and that's what are the roles in the industries that are non-IT related, right? So Agile and Scrum were sort of originally created for software developers, and now in the United States is growing into multiple industries, multiple disciplines. You see it in sales, you see it in marketing, you see it in banking, not in the software sense of creating the product for those industries, but how those teams of salespeople perhaps are interacting on a daily basis, how they're closing deals, how they're working, right? So you mentioned the plant example, and that indicates that some of these companies are using Agile in non-IT environments. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think that there were like different stages, and the first one, the really early from Agile, it was like, okay, this is for software, right? And then you saw different implementations on different type of non-software companies. For example, yeah, a huge variety, or even in big companies in different departments. For example, we have helped or guided a Canadian company to implement Scrum in human resources, for example. We are right now helping some big departments in big corporations from user experience and UX UI, right? User all the design part. So I think that the next stage of Agile will not be okay. So let's speak about in what type of companies I can use Agile that are non-software. I think that this will eventually disappear because in general, every single company have problems to solve, right? If you are a bank, for example, you have a lot of different problems to solve. For example, if you are detecting that you need to double the sales on credit cards, for example, so you need to double the number of credit cards that people have, that's a problem you have. If you want to, for example, use the exact same amount of primary materia prima. How do you say this?
Yeah, the I don't know if there's a direct translation. Could be missing it too. But the essential material.
Yeah, see, you have the exact same quantity of essential material, right?
The
And now you want to have more product, 1.5 more product, then you have a problem, right? So every single company, what they are dealing month after month is solving little specific problems, right? So whenever the companies, and it doesn't matter what are the companies about, if they understand that they can have cross-functional teams for a period of time, some months, in order to solve that problem, then you will make money, then you will have profit, then you will achieve your business metrics, your OKRs or whatever you are using, right? So and whenever you understand this, it's not okay, so this is a project, a human resources project, this is for example a design problem, this is a software development problem. No, you have business problems that you need to solve, improve sales, or be more efficient in this, right? So you need, as a cross-functional teams, one person from marketing, one person from human resources, one person from software development in order to solve this business problem. I think that whenever the companies or the world will achieve that level, we will not longer ask us, okay, so in what other areas can you apply Scrum that are non-software development? Because every single business problem, it's a combination of different needs, a little bit of software, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales, and then you will solve the business problem, right? So I think that the basic difference between not using Agile and using Agile is you will work exactly the same way, just you will have more collaboration between individuals and you will create transparency. And every week or every 2 weeks, you will ask yourself 2 single questions. Can I do this faster and easier in order to produce more? The first one. And the second question, is the product we are building solving the business problem, yes or no? If the answer is yes, continue doing it. If the answer is no, then pivot, change the definition of your whatever you are doing as a product, and then build another thing, right? So making transparency and iteratively asking these two questions, I think that this can be applied to solve every single business problem.
Yeah, well said. And you keep hitting on a topic that reminds me a lot of Edward Deming's quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I'm doing from memory. But something along Edward Deming was sort of the founder of Lean, right? Because he created these ways of thinking that he then took to Japan, and that's where the Toyota way and the lean manufacturing way of working came from. Deming used to say, every leader I meet with believes that their problems are unique. And then he goes on to say, their problems might be unique, but I'm finding that the solutions are universal. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So this idea that, yes, there's customization, of course, there's consideration in terms of where you apply these elements, but they are solutions to many of the problems that these organizations are having. And that fruit is there for them to grab. It's a low-hanging fruit. So a lot of times it's making them aware that it exists, and then how do they apply that to their particular environment, whether it's software, whether it's sugar, whether it's banking, there's a method of working that can be applied to it. And the last point I wanted to hear Gerardo hit on, because you have a fascinating background, right? You just went on and addressed all of the non-technical aspects of using Agile and using Scrum and Scrum at Scale. But you're also the director of the computer science department at your university. So you're a very technically oriented person. And you're bringing business and you're bringing transformation to non-technical parts. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, in fact, I think that it's really, really, really important to speak first about the basis of Agile, about the reason of Agile. And I'm always telling to the coaches I work with that whenever you explain something to upper management or to the ones that are executing, you need to explain it as if you are explaining this to a 10 years old kid. He will understand you, right? So I try to keep off from going to the technical that much. However, I always said in my classes, okay, so for example, with the books of Dr. Jeff Sutherland, he says that if you apply Scrum, then you will go at least 4 times faster, right? However, if what you are doing as a company, as a team, it's a mess, you will create a mess 4 times faster. In no time, you will have a huge, big mess, right? So you need to be very, very, you need to be very careful on the technical details, on the excellence in engineering, depending on what you are building right now. I'm the director of the computer science engineering at the University Francisco Marroquín here in Guatemala, which is the best university in Guatemala. And we create the engineers we create, which, by the way, it's amazing the way we designed this career. We called different experts and directors from LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, now X, and a lot of companies, and we did a user story mapping. So in 4 hours, they created all the career, right? So of course, we need to pay attention on the technical excellence, depending on what you are doing. So in software development, for example, you cannot, of course, use Scrum if you are not using some extreme programming good practices, for example. So for me, good practice is everything. But if you are in the agro industry, then you need to use their standards, their security standards, their safety standards. You need to be very careful of the technical part, which for a company like us in aprendescrum.com, it's quite challenging, because the coaches, the consultants we have, they need to see different environments using different technical needs, right? So we cannot be experts in all the technical part, but we for sure make sure that this technical part will be accomplished, and that the engineering standards and good practices will be applied, right? And this is something we are starting to push in our different clients. They need to have their own coaches. They need to have their own consultants, specialists in whatever they are doing, right? Because just if we could speak for hours just about good practices on software development, right? All the DevOps part of the test automation, all the continuous delivery, right? And it's a whole world. If you go to the agro industry, it's a whole world as well with that specific standard. So as I'm used to work with different type of clients, I usually try to avoid speaking about technical details, as you have seen. But yeah, you need to be specialized in a specific sector. Myself, for example, I did the engineering, software engineering in the best university in the world, which is the Universidad Francisco Marroquín, Guatemala. And then I did a master in software engineering and a PhD in software engineering as well in France. In Paris is where I met Dr. Jeff Sutherland, and I received my first Scrum Master course back then. So yeah, I'm really passionate about Agile and Scrum, and I'm also really passionate about all the technical part in software development. And of course, I ask help to other coaches around the world when we need to be technically perfect in other sectors which are non-software development.
That's excellent. Did Jeff Sutherland deliver that class in French?
No, it was in English.
Yeah, that would have been very interesting to see.
yeah, it was in English.
That is fantastic. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Gerardo. I think as we wrap it up, we want to give organizations in Guatemala and in Latin America a look into the opportunities that they have and what can they expect, and perhaps what are some of the next milestones in Agile as you see it, coming from Dr. Gerardo Morales. What does the evolution of Agile look like in Latin America, given your perspective so far in your experience?
Okay, so I think that I would like to think that Agile and well, Scrum and Agile, more Agile, right? It's the natural evolution of project management. I think that if Ken Schreiber hears this, he will like to kill me because he doesn't like the project managers. But I think that if you see, for example, and this is really interesting. Some years ago, all the companies and many managers I spoke with, they were like, okay, so we have traditional project management, the Project Management Institute, PMI, versus Scrum. Which should I use, right? But last year, in the latest version of the PM book, the Project Management Book of Knowledge, they changed it, everything. So now you will see concepts from Agile. You will see iterative production. You will see like different roles. You will see Agile here. Of course, this is the first version of the PM book speaking about Agile. So I think that we need to give them time just to experiment, and maybe from now to 10 years they will, after fixing it and fixing it and fixing it through real experimentation, they will have something as good as Scrum, maybe, right? Because Scrum is not new, and Scrum has been changing and changing and changing, and every 2-3 years it gets better and better. But something interesting is that even the PMI is shifting to Agile. So this means that Agile is the natural evolution of the project management, right? So there is no more traditional project manager versus Agile. Now is okay. Are you doing the things are as in the past, or are you living the present? Not even the future, right? So I think that what will happen next is that we will not longer speak that much about Agile or not Agile, because I think the mindset of people is already changing, and the new generations are already changing. I remember I have been giving Scrum classes since maybe 8-9 years ago. And I remember giving these courses in the university as well. And the students were like, whoa, that's amazing what you are speaking. It does make so much sense what you are speaking. The new generations are like, yeah, but that's logical. You cannot do it otherwise, right? So I think that this will become something normal. However, I think that we really, in our Latin American countries, we really need to fight companies that are making profit, producing a lot of material in Scrum and Agile, but is bad Scrum, bad quality, and they are just misleading professionals, right? Because the world will change, and the adoption of this will change worldwide. The question is, will be Latin America still on play or not, right? We need to help Latin American corporations to be competitive, to be fast, to be not to be cheap in the way of cheap salaries, but in the way we are so optimal that it is not expensive to do a high quality product with us, right? We don't have waste of time or waste of money. This is why we are cheap. Our salaries are expensive, but our products are cheaper than other countries where you are going to spend a couple of years, and after a couple of years you will have nothing, a really shitty product. So I think that we need to boost our Latin American companies in order to keep the competitiveness of our countries. Not because they will get lower, but because the competitiveness of other countries will go higher because of this Agile adoption. So we need to keep on the play. Yeah. This is why, for example, with Dr. Jeff Sutherland, I did I think among my favorite projects in my life is the creation of a little small certification in Spanish, because it was meant at the beginning to boost Latin American companies, which is called the Register Scrum Basics. This is a certification that it's high quality content. It certifies you. It gives you the right information. So we are trying to create an alternative for these bad Scrum certifications, cheap certifications, and as we need to to people to train with our good quality certification and don't take the cheap bad quality certification, then we create it as cheap as possible. It's free, right? So if you want to understand good quality Scrum, you don't need to pay anything. You just go and take your register Scrum basics. Right now, we have a complete course in Spanish. From the beginning till the end, it's just a 2 hours course. And right now, I'm happy to announce that I'm working with different trainers to start or to launch the register Scrum basics in Portuguese, in Chinese, in English. Yeah, so far so good, and I hope to be able to help other trainers from the Agile Education program from Scrumming to build this, to have a good resource, really good quality, and improve the competitiveness of our companies as a country, right, globally.
That is fantastic. I love that. You mentioned a couple of things. In fact, you meant we could spend all day, as we like to say here, geeking out, right, and talking about all the things. You talked about PMI and their pivot into more agile, and how eventually agile will just become the way of working. And you mentioned Dr. Sutherland several times, and myself. You and I were both at a conference very recently where he dropped a small grenade in the room, so to speak, right? And he said, look, the path that we're taking, where we're going, eventually there will be some industries that will outlaw the traditional project management way of working. It will not be allowed. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty significant statement coming from the creator of Scrum, or the co-creator, right? And now we're seeing some of that, not in the outlawing perspective, but the openness of traditional organizations to incorporate Agile into simply how we work, right? And PMI acquired Disciplined Agile. That's why we see in the PM book, in the latest edition of that, so much more material relating to Agile, because they got all that intellectual property then there, now distilling and incorporating it. So the idea that Agile will just be how we work, right, and not a separate way of working, it's very encouraging. I love that. You also, in that content, mentioned the idea that individuals need to stay sharp, right? It's not just about getting a training class and now you know what you're doing. There's opportunity for you to continue to sharpen the saw, right? Whether it's through self-training, like you just mentioned, that you're offering now in Spanish and soon in multiple languages, or whether organizations are reinvesting and making sure that those individuals remain agile, is a key element of making sure that we don't have bad Agile or bad Scrum out there. And the last point, I think it's essential, it's critical. Because when we talk about bad Agile and bad Scrum, I'm always very careful about how we address that. I don't want to beat someone over the head. We don't want to beat them. You're doing bad, bad, bad. I also think it's important that we are not, book thumpers. In other words, we're not just parsing the text and, oh, no, that's not in the guide. You don't do that. That's not what we do. I know from conversations you and I have had several times. It's about meeting organizations and individuals where they are, and then going in the direction that would amplify the benefits, and we get rid of the things that are harmful. Like you said, right? We want to get that benefit and then amplify it throughout the organization. So what we look for when we say bad Agile, we're looking for those anti-patterns. We're looking for those things that will be harmful, because we don't want that one thing that was in one team now to exist in 2 teams and in 3 teams and in 4 teams. We want the good stuff to be amplified. So that idea of flexibility and practicality versus rigid, this is how it must be done, is a line that we are navigating very frequently, right?
Right. Well, there are two things I would like to say about your comments. The first one is, I think that And in LinkedIn, sometimes I receive comments are you are I don't know in English, but in Spanish is eres un purista, right?
Purist. Yeah.
You are a purist, so you need you take the Scrum Guide as a Bible, and you need to. In fact, it's not like this. It's the like the bad Scrum is always done by someone who doesn't understand why is he doing something, right? So, for example, whenever I see teams that are making bad Scrum in daily Scrums, for example, I just go with them and I ask them, okay, so how do you do the daily Scrum? Like this and this and that. Okay. And I'm seeing that this is not working. So I ask them, why are you doing it like this? Oh, because I read, no. What's the goal of doing it? Why are you doing it? So after the 5 whys of every single mistake, even not reading the Scrum Guide, but after these 5 whys, they will start getting rid of bad Scrum, because the good Scrum is when you understand why are you doing this event, what's the goal of this event, are you accomplishing this goal or not. So I think that the good Scrum is just you will use a Scrum as a base, and then it's just common sense, right? There are some people that says Scrum is whatever it works for you, right? However, the other thing is that I have heard many companies said that they need to tropicalize Scrum for their companies, right? And they need to use this Scrum adoption, right? So I will do Scrum, but Scrum our way. I have heard this several times. The problem with this is that the companies don't have results, right? And they started using my Scrum style, right? But whenever you ask yourself why this is not working, it is Scrum or it is your style. Because if you have both of them, you cannot actually understand what is the problem. So for me, it's really important to start Scrum by the book. And whenever you will be running real Scrum by the book for a year, then you can ask yourself, what is not working for me? Then you can do the adaptations you need, but not before, right? So for me to start with real Scrum by the book is really important. It's not that I'm a purist, because I think that the next step is to use whatever it works for you, right? But it's important to start with not with adoptions, because it will create a greater complexity. So you will not be able to understand what part is not working.
I love that. And it's a topic that I think needs to be discussed more and more. It's easy to confuse an individual for being a strict dictator or purist or guide thumper from an individual who's simply trying to organize the team in such a way that they become the most effective and then amplify that throughout. You mentioned a couple of things, Gerardo. We don't need to elaborate on those, but you said common sense. Sometimes common sense is not so common, right? The idea that, for example, in our conversations, you mentioned user story mapping. It's a technique. Not many individuals might be familiar with that. Very, very helpful. You mentioned a couple of other techniques that are extremely useful, but are nowhere to be found in the Scrum Guide, right? So we apply those things. You mentioned the 5 whys. What is that, right? It appears nowhere in the Scrum Guide. You have your tool set, and that's the idea of peeling the onion, and there's a technique for that. So a lot of what we do is to help organizations, to help individuals, to help teams apply not just the Scrum rules, which are the 3-5-3s with the commitments that go with that, but all of the other stuff that goes beyond that, depending on what that organization needs from a tooling perspective, right?
Totally, yeah.
I love that thought. And that's a great way for us to conclude. I want to tell you that it's been enlightening having this conversation. Gerardo, thank you for sharing your profound insight and for being our eyes and ears on the ground in Latin America. I want to thank our audience. Stay tuned for more discussion with Agile Genesis topics as we hear. Gerardo did make me promise that we would have a reverse interview where he will torture me in Spanish, just like I tortured him in English. So stay tuned for more conversations between Gerardo and myself. Until next time, keep innovating and stay agile, everyone. Thank you very much, Gerardo. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. See you.